Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, David Bayuk. Hello. Thanks for joining us on the Career Success Tips podcast. I am super
Thank you very much
excited
for
to
having
speak
me.
with you and share your insights with the ROI in You community. First of all, we're mostly speaking to emerging professionals and recent grads, potentially, someone who maybe has a liberal arts degree or communications degree who really wants to get into digital marketing because there's a ton of career growth there and good salaries.
Mhm.
But what are some things that's happening in your worldview as a recruiter in the IT world? What's maybe something that's happening that's pretty current or fresh that our demographic, our audience wouldn't really know about?
Well, I'm sure they know about it, but it's really COVID.
Mm-hmm.
What's happened is that COVID has created an incredible gap in talent, partly because of the fact that people haven't completed their degrees yet. They had to take some time away from school if they were in the final stages of developing their degrees, or dissertations or whatever it might be. And the second thing is that there's a lot of fear, or there was a lot of fear about whether it's even possible to engage in a job search, because how do you do that? How do you go to an
Yeah.
interview, sit across a desk from someone when you're both wearing masks, or if one of you isn't vaccinated or whatever? So that's a huge, huge complicating factor. One thing that has never changed and never will change is you have to be able to get the opportunity to speak. And I always talk about interviews as the key to the door. It's not an automatic. When you get an interview, you've been given a chance. Here's a key. You got to use the most of your skills you can to make that impact strong as possible during that time frame. Whether it's a phone screen, which most of them are these days,
Mm-hmm.
or in person, via a Zoom chat or something like we're doing right now, or it's something that's just really really challenging, and people don't even go near it. They're afraid of it. So that's the biggest thing right now, is don't be afraid, because the world's okay. It really is. We're getting there. It just, be safe, be careful, but understand who you are and understand how your impact will can what impact you can have on the organization. So I was a liberal arts major myself. I graduated with a degree in psychology with a minor in criminology. And as it turns out, in recruiting, psychology and criminology are a good match.
Sort of the opposite end of the criminology spectrum, right?
I kid, of course, but the point is that learning how to speak to people is really, really critical. And that's where recruiters, are absolutely essential. Most people who are in technology, whether you are like, I started out as a non-technical recruiter. I was working with admin clerical people, secretarial, paralegals, legal secretaries, that sort of thing. So I had to learn the business that way, but the fundamentals are the same,
Hmm.
regardless of what the discipline is. It's really just about understanding what it is you're trying to find and how to make sure you ask the proper questions. One thing about technology is, if you want to know about technology, all you have to do is ask a technologist one question and you'll hear about it for a long time. So if you're interested in learning, that's how you do it. You talk about, how to make a watch. If you ask someone what time it is, that's what technology is really all about. And if you're avid about it, like I am, I'm a technophile. I'm an early adopter for all sorts of technology stuff. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. And a couple of times I've done some things outside of technology because I needed to, the market dictated that I had to, and so forth. But I found myself not as engaged. I think that, if you're interested in tech, and you really should be, because right now it's not just technology as an overview. It's also very specific things like AI and machine learning and things like that
Sure.
that are very, very, very close to the edge of the bleeding edge, if you will. And it's not impossible to learn this stuff. It really isn't. I mean, believe me, I tell you, I was a psychology major. I didn't know anything about technology whatsoever. It doesn't take much except for curiosity and dedication to learning and listening, and also asking the right questions. Me, as a personal knock on myself, which I did share with you before this conversation on that's live, is I tend to talk a lot. I tend to talk very fast because I'm so interested and intrigued by someone who's telling me something that I will actually jump on their conversation and say, "Oh, what do you mean? Explain more about that."
Yeah.
That's something I have had to work on my entire 30-year career, and it's something that you have to be careful of. But it's not the bad thing necessarily. As long as you're careful about making sure you don't step on someone's sentences, as long as you don't, ask questions that are inappropriate. I think that the most important thing is just listening, and not just listening, but hearing. And there's a big
Right.
difference between those two
Processing.
things. Right. Understand what they're telling you and ask questions that are relevant to what they're saying, not relevant to what you want to hear or what relevant what you want to know about. I mean, you are a recruiter, you have a job. You have to make sure this person is qualified. This person's got the right attitude, that they've got the right, flexibility to drive to the location if that happens to be a commute involved. All these things are important, fundamentals that you'll as if you go into recruiting at all, you'll find that this is the way they train you is along those lines. But there's a piece of it that's really not trained well.
Mm.
It's
Right.
the
It's like a
human
gut.
side.
Yeah.
It really is following your gut. I use a small example. When you run into a situation where, and I have many times, where you're talking to a person and a candidate, for example, or even a client for that matter, and you're trying to understand what their needs are, you're trying to understand what you need to know to help them. And they're very reticent, they're very reluctant to tell you something because it may not be, they don't want to give away the salary range, they don't want to give away their salary history, or whatever it might be. And I talk about putting the pencil down. What I mean by that is you're talking to someone, whether it's in person or on the phone, you're taking notes. You just say, "All right, hold on. Here's why I need to know this information. I'm not being nosy. I'm not being intrusive. I'm trying to help myself understand what your needs are, because the only way I'm going to be effective for you is if I understand that, as well as understanding the client's needs, or vice versa, depending on who you're
Right.
talking about." So that's an absolute critical thing. I always talk about putting the pencil down. It was like the fourth day of my business in the business in 1991 when I started. I learned that, and it works like a charm.
Yeah, well, it's de-escalating, right? What you are sensing is
Exactly.
becoming an escalating
Right.
situation, obviously in a very low key manner, right? If you're in an interview, if you don't, but you can sense when people are becoming uncomfortable, and
Absolutely. And you have to
how
make
do you
sure
change the
trust is
tide?
so important. I tell people all the time when they're dealing with agencies, whether they're candidates or clients who are trying to engage agencies, whether they're me or someone else, trust is absolutely tantamount. If
Hmm.
you can't get someone to understand that you're in it for them too, then you're never going to get anywhere. So I've stayed with recruiting my entire career, even though it's really a sales job. If you think about it, you're selling your
Sure.
candidates on job opportunities, you're selling clients on candidates, things like that. It's a win-win-win for everybody, because nobody loses. If you go to buy a car, most of the time you walk out of the dealership feeling like you just got screwed. I'm
Yeah.
sorry to use the
Right.
term, but
Yeah. No,
everybody's like,
sounds good.
somebody finds out, somebody feels that they got paid too much, or the dealership feels they get paid too little, or I don't know. It always seems to me like there's a loser and a winner. Just
Yeah.
like in litigation, I wanted to be an attorney when I first started out in my business, and then I realized, no, no, because there's never a clear cut win-win. It's always lose-win.
Yeah.
So in recruiting, it's a win-win-win if you listen and if you talk carefully, and if you don't talk as much as me, you'll hear things that are very valuable to hear from people, that they have a lot to offer, and it's just a matter of sometimes the communication that they have, their style, needs to be coached a little bit.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things I've ever done is, and the most important things I've ever done, is train. And I wrote this manual a number of years ago now, but I've used the fundamentals of it still. And I, even today, when I'm prepping a candidate for an interview, I still use the same piece of paper that I put in that manual myself, even though I've been doing this for 30 years, because it's a list of things. It's 15 or 16
Yeah.
items long, and it's all about relevance and what you need to know. And I forget stuff. I mean, you can't remember
Right.
everything. So
Right.
I look at it
That
as a
checklist
checklist.
manifesto.
Never get away from the lists.
Yeah.
Never get away from lists. Are critically important to me anyway. That's how I operate. That's how I roll. That's why I don't forget stuff. I really think that the most important thing of all is consistency, 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 which I said to you in our earlier conversation via email. Most important thing you can do is to be consistent. Go to work every
Hmm.
day, do the best you can. Understand that there are ups and there are downs, and the ups are very up, and the downs can be pretty down. But for the
Hmm.
most part, if you're doing the job diligently and carefully and listening, again, listening and hearing, not just listening, then you're going to get a long way down the road. Easy.
I love
It's all
it.
about people.
Yeah, I think that's really great. So could you just briefly tell me a little bit about how you work with individuals at what stage in their career, and then are they paying you? What does that look like? Because I think for
Are
a lot
they?
of people
I mean,
haven't worked with recruiters.
I see. No, no, no. There's no payment. There's no payment given to a recruiter. Well, let me rephrase that. Some agencies will charge a fee. They'll usually call it something like career counseling or
Mm-hmm.
coaching. They'll usually try to charge you an hourly rate for a certain number of hours. And that happens a lot at the senior level when people are being outplaced by an organization like, say, Korn Ferry or Heidrick and Struggles or one of those, where there's a cost associated. Normally, the employer who's let the person go is the one
Right.
paying that amount of money.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's not how it works. So be cautious of that. If you're talking to a recruiter, make sure, and it's for the very, very, very largest percentage, 99% of the time, there's no charge to you whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
What you need to do as a candidate, if you're looking for a job, is understand that communication is critical, honesty is critical, integrity is critical. Those are the things, references are
Mm-hmm.
critical. Those are the things that really help you, because how do you differentiate yourself? Is you're a graduate of amongst 100, 200, 500 people from whatever school, all in the same discipline. How do you stand out from the crowd? And the most important thing I can tell you to do is just be yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and just really try to explain what you're trying to do. I mean, don't be a salesperson.
Right.
Be a consultant. That's what recruiters really are, if they're doing the job correctly, is they're consulting. They're helping people understand the realities of the marketplace that they're dealing with, or their clients, whomever. Because when you become a subject matter expert, and it doesn't take very long to realize how this industry operates. It's actually, I've heard it 1,000 times. It's not rocket science. It really isn't. But it is detail oriented, and it is important to listen to people very carefully, because if you
Mm-hmm.
don't, you'll start doing the wrong thing, and before you know it, they're not happy with you. So you
Right.
have to just be a good listener, and a good hearer, if that's a word. I don't even know if that's a word.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about maybe the cost of, and obviously for companies who are working with a good recruiter like yourself, there's the reason for that is that you are the expert and this is what you do all day every day, as opposed to, let's say, a hiring manager who's the person who you may be working for, you as in a student, or a recent grad, or you're applying for a job. But as an employer, it benefits them to work with you because you have all this experience. Like, how many resumes do you think that you've looked at in the past month?
1,000,
Yeah.
maybe.
Okay. Yeah,
It's really that big
I've
of a
looked
number.
at 30 for a project that I'm working on just to help out.
Yeah,
But
if you're working on one project, that's very, very common, 30 to 40 to 50. But if you're working on multiple projects, it can be a lot more than that. And it's difficult because resumes are easy to write. They're very easy to write. They're not easy to defend. So you think about a dissertation,
ooh,
in
interesting.
college and so
I
forth.
like this thought.
You have to be able to justify what it is that you are saying about yourself and be able to back it up. And
Mm-hmm.
people can be and you'll find a lot of recruiters out there that are pretty cynical about it. Because it's very common for, if you look at a technical resume, to see this big, huge paragraph sized thing of buzzwords. It's all the
Yeah.
technologies, this, that, Java and .NET and on and on and on and on. And you say to yourself, wow, this person's got it all. But until you talk to them and figure out, did they just walk by a development area that was using .NET, or did they actually use .NET? You know what I mean? So
Knowledge
you
by
have to be
osmosis.
right, right, right.
.net is airborne.
I hate I hate to sound cynical, but a lot of times people will do that because what they're trying to do is get that key I was talking about earlier. They need the key to the door. And once you get into the interview session, whether it's in person or on the phone or whatever it is, you have to unlock the door by being able to back up what you say about yourself and be able to show them that you care about what the job's about. And that's the prep sheet I was telling you about before. I use it thoroughly because even though I've dealt with people all the way through CEO level, sometimes when I do the preparation with them for an interview, they'll say, "Wow, I hadn't thought about that. That's a great point," because everybody thinks that they're the greatest interviewer in the world. They really think that they're smart. They think that they're capable. They think they should be hired automatically, and that's probably true. But the reality is, unfortunately, that when you're hiring somebody, whether it's through a recruiter or not, generally speaking, especially these days, you're looking for reasons to eliminate versus
Sure.
include.
Yep.
So you have to be careful to be sure that you're talking about the right things. And
Mm-hmm.
that's hard to know. And that's where recruiters can really help. If a recruiter is knowledgeable enough about the client that they're dealing with and the opportunity that they're presenting to you, a lot of those questions are answered before you even have the first conversation. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure that everybody out there who's applied for jobs right now has applied, 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 gotten these weird questionnaires back. They're like, I don't do that. What the heck, you know?
Right.
So it's really about understanding that the employer is trying to figure it out too. They're doing the best
Yes.
that they can to figure out the right matches, and matches on a permanent basis. If you're hiring somebody permanently, not a contractor or a temporary person, there's a lot more involved. It's marriage versus dating, really.
Yeah.
You know,
Let's
you have to really go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Let's see, I'm doing it to you. The jump in. Let's talk a little
It's all
bit
right.
about the cost of making a mismatch. A poor
Oh,
hire. And obviously this happens all the time. And one of the reasons to use a recruiter is to prevent that. Right? But can
right.
you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that,
Sure. I
again,
mean,
if you're
when you hire someone, you bring them into your team, um, regardless of what the salary is or whether there's commission or bonuses or whatever, those numbers are real and they're basically they're red ink for the company. Every time they pay you a paycheck, they're putting it on the negative side of the ledger until you start to earn money back to pay that back. And it's a very, very costly mistake if you're forget about a fee for a minute. I mean, if you're talking about just hiring a person off the street, that person comes across in such a way that you think they're the right match. You train them, you bring them on board. It's really going fine. Then all of a sudden they're not the right match. So that can be something that's avoidable by asking the right questions and listening carefully. Like I said before,
Mhm.
that's my mantra: listen, 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 and understand if you can exactly what the whole picture is. But the cost is enormous. I mean, we do charge fees, absolutely, no doubt. I mean, if I was going to place you at $100,000 salary base, I'd be charging the company $25,000 for that,
Wow.
or 20 to 25% is what it is currently, and
Okay.
it has been higher than that in over time. But that's the amount of money that's paid to the recruiter. If you're talking about non-recruiting, you're talking about the same amount of money in loss. If you're the
Hmm.
wrong match, you're going to lose that much money, and you can't recover that. You hire someone through a recruiting agency and they don't work out, well, there's a guarantee there, so you get some of the money back. But the point is not that. The point is the match is really, really hard to define. And that's really where most clients come to a recruiter because they can't really define it themselves. As I told you
Sure.
before, I work with an organization in Cambridge called Venture Cafe. These are people who are entrepreneurs, cutting edge, bleeding edge biotech researchers, pharmaceuticals, gene splicers, the people who are really, really doing cool stuff. They are growing because they've invented something neat and cool and possibly going to save lives. Moderna, for example, is one of the clients that I had before they had the Pfizer thing, before they had
Yeah.
the vaccination thing. I mean, and they a lot of times they're brilliant, 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 forward thinking, 60,000 foot view. Oh my God, this is where the world's going to go. This is what we need to do.
Yeah.
But how to do it, the fundamentals of how to get the person that you need to do that work, to make that vision real, that's where you need a recruiter to help you bridge that gap. Because a lot of times these people just don't have that knowledge. They just don't. And it's not their fault. It's not because they didn't spend time when they were developing their skill set and learning how to interview. They spent their time developing their skill set and how to
Right.
break ground and do cool stuff. They didn't. So that you need a trust. Trust is so hard to get. I mean, you can lose it in a day. It's
Yeah.
that quick
Yeah.
if you don't do it properly. So as a candidate, if you're going into an interview situation, whether it's through a recruiter or not, I think that the most important two things I can tell you are preparation and research.
Hmm.
Look at the client, look at the company. If you don't have an agency that's willing to give you the information you need, don't work with them. You need
Hmm.
somebody who's going to give you all the information that you can possibly digest to get yourself ready. Because even if it's a basic entry level position, we're talking about, first job out of college,
Sure.
coding, helping bang away some stuff in .NET, that's still important because you have to go there every day. As a
Yeah.
recruiter, I know that. I can push and I can pull and I can try to influence. I mean, I'm a very good salesperson. I can sell a drowning man a glass of water. But that doesn't mean that I want to do that because if I do that, then what's going to happen in 3 months? You're going to
Right.
call me and say, "What did you do to me?"
Yes.
Because the only thing that keeps me going all these years is my reputation. It would take me
Hmm.
about a minute to lose it. So I don't operate that way,
Yeah.
and that's how I am. Most good ones are, and it's the critically important thing is to figure out how to figure out if that's the right person for you. And it's really more about gut. It's more about gut level instinct. If you're talking to a recruiter, ask them just a basic few questions. Try to see how they operate, what their modus operandi is. How they actually go about the job. And if you don't feel comfortable, if they're asking you for things you're not comfortable with, then you're probably not talking to the right person.
Mm.
But that's
Mm.
why I think that if you talk to somebody who knows what they're talking about, and I mean that in terms of non-confrontational, non-aggressive, someone who's willing to listen and try to help you out, that's the right recruiter for you. And if you want to be a
Awesome.
recruiter, that's the right person to be.
Yeah. Well, you answered my question, which was going to be like, what should you look for, or what are some red flags? But the other question I have are, do many recruiters work with recent grads and younger
Very
professionals?
many do. Very, very many do. And it's interesting. It's an interesting question, Suzanne, because for a very long time that wasn't the case.
Right. That's what I
People,
thought.
because you are charging a very large premium to get these people on board. And a lot of times the attitude from the hiring manager is, well, why should I pay you X amount of dollars to hire someone that I can hire myself? Well, the answer to that question is kind of, we've already covered a lot of it, but it's really, what is your time worth? I mean,
Right.
if you're an HR person or if you're a recruiter for an internal role, that's not the only thing you do. You have things, you've got employee relations, you've got benefits to deal with, you've got all sorts of other things going on. You don't need to know that. I mean, you don't you don't necessarily know that. You should know it, but if you don't know it, you need help. And that's where someone on the outside who does it all the time, every day, all day long can help you.
Right. Well, and it's you mentioned a couple things that like, well, you can't ask that anymore. Like, what was your past salary? Like that was always a question when
No,
I was interviewing for jobs, but now
yeah, you
that you
can't.
can't do
You
that.
can't anymore. What you can ask is what you want for salary.
Okay.
And that's really that's the only thing you can ask. You can say, what are you targeting for a salary? And then your only tool there is to tell the client that's what this person is targeting. And if they say, we don't really think this person has that kind of background, then you go back to your candidate and you tell them, this is what I'm hearing. What do you think? A lot of times people will aim high. I do. Whenever I interview for a job, I
Sure.
always try to aim as high as I can. Why wouldn't you? You don't get if you don't ask, right?
Yes.
And that's one other thing that I will say before the end of this podcast is one of the biggest pieces of advice I can give anybody in any interview, no matter if you're sure or not, if you want this job, tell the employer you want the job. Because the very first question I get from every client ever is, what do they think? Do they want the job? You have the opportunity when you're sitting in front of them or on the phone with them to tell them that you do want the job. I beg your
Speaking
pardon.
of
I'm
the
sorry about
phone,
that.
right on cue.
Yeah. Speaking of the phone,
Yeah,
right?
so
This
just
is
to
a
be
jump.
deliberate,
It's a
right?
jump.
And to express your enthusiasm to be there
Yes.
and that you really do want the job and to and I think once you've done the research and you've learned a little bit about the role, about the company, then you have it in your heart basically, and you can enthusiastically say that. If you can't answer that question yourself, is this somewhere that I see myself being? Then you either haven't done enough research or it isn't the right role. And there's so many opportunities out there. I mean, that's one thing before we wrap up, I'd love to hear you talk about like in your history of, for young people. I graduated into a recession. So, what are the opportunities looking like now versus, in the
It's
past
incredible.
20 something
It's an
years?
incredible opportunity. It's an incredible opportunity. And I'll tell you this, you're absolutely correct about knowledge about the organization. But these days you and I, unfortunately, both didn't have this. The internet and the research availability of information out there is astonishing.
Yeah.
And if you have even the basic fundamentals of research, you can know before you pick up the phone when someone calls you for an interview whether you want the job or not, or whether you even think you're in the right ballpark. I don't
Yeah.
know about you, but I've had many an interview over the years where I talk to a company and they're like, I said, you do what? Because I didn't know what they did because I couldn't find out. Now you got
Yeah.
Hoover's and now you've got LinkedIn and now
Yeah.
you've got all these tools that are very, very focused. I would say one thing as well before you do wrap up is be very, very careful with social media.
Mm.
Very careful. I mean, people, it's very, very simple. If you do some crazy stuff on a weekend bachelor party and you put it up online, it's not hard to find and it
No.
could actually hurt you. So be careful what you're doing. Be careful what you're putting out there. Just like when you're dating somebody, you want to be sure that you're not pretending you're somebody you're not, but be who you are and understand that your fun stuff isn't the same as the professional stuff. Keep Facebook to it Facebook and keep LinkedIn to LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Those are two different things. And I trust LinkedIn. I'm not even on Facebook or Instagram or any of those. I don't trust them anymore. I never did. So
Mm.
I'm on LinkedIn. I use that constantly. Job boards aren't bad. They really aren't. I mean, there's a lot of negative out there about them, and it really is true. There's a lot of chaff amongst the wheat, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But job boards can be useful if they're used properly. And
Yeah.
that's a matter of understanding who you're, and you need what you need. What, in my considered opinion, is if you're going to be looking for help with an agency like myself or an agent like myself, you need to trust that I know what I'm talking about. You need to understand that I will tell you what I will do the best I can for you, and I'll tell you what, even if it's hard to hear, I'll tell you, hey, listen, you got to be careful with this or understand this. And that's what you need. It's like any other professional service. You go to buy a house or sell a house, you go to get an attorney to help you out with something. You need somebody who knows the business that you're dealing with. And I don't want to characterize myself as someone like that because I've never had any kind of advanced degrees. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a doctor. I'm nothing like that.
No,
But
but you
it's the
have an
same
expertise.
concept.
Comes down to
It's the same
expertise.
concept.
Yeah.
Right, right. Even a carpet layer. You don't just buy your own carpet and try to lay it down in your house, right? You bring somebody in who knows what they're doing. And that's what it
Yeah.
is about recruiting. If you're doing it properly, as a recruiter, you're listening, you're doing the best you can to advise, and it's really not a problem. It should not be a problem to walk away. If there's a situation at hand, a candidate, a client, something that's intractable or impossible, you just need to say, listen, your expectations aren't really what I think are going to work. I think that we need to, not work together right now because there's no worse thing in the world than being disappointed in a professional service. If
Yeah.
you are working hard, it's like when they say that you go to the restaurants and you have a wonderful experience. How many people do you tell? One or two?
Yeah.
Have one negative experience? You tell 8, 9, 10.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that
Exactly.
comes back on you all the time.
Right. Yeah. And just, you got to be, like you said, be super careful what you're putting out on the
Totally.
interwebs. I would say, too, just behavior in general, because now there's cameras everywhere. I mean,
Oh my God, yes.
I saw
Yes, indeed.
somebody posted a prank that they had. Basically, a woman was walking her dog, and this was on a Facebook clip, was walking her dog and didn't pick up her dog poop. So they went and collected it and, like, yeah. So I'm like, what? Like,
Yeah.
especially I think that there's this fascination with being a mini celebrity. And if you're a young professional, like, you got to be really careful with the things that you're documenting because,
It's very true. It's very true. Both of my children are they're older. I have a 22-year-old and a 19-year-old. A girl is 19. My son's 22. They're both very into YouTube and
mm,
YouTubers and how these men and women make tons of money doing this stuff that they do. And a lot of times I listen to it and I'm like, that's funny, that's cool, but
yeah,
that's just not the way. That's not me. That's all.
yeah,
But you have to understand that when you put something out there, it's out there permanently.
yeah.
You can't. You can delete what you want, but it's never really deleted.
Yeah. Well, and I have those same experiences with my 9-year-old or almost 9-year-old. Like, why is this entertaining? And yeah,
I know,
it's
I know.
crazy.
I will say this though, I do love SpongeBob. That's
Yeah.
the one show that I just if I'm walking through the room and it's on, I watch it. I have to admit that it's a guilty pleasure of mine.
Oh, I'll have to check it out. We haven't really gotten into SpongeBob.
Oh my God. Well, be careful because if you introduce that to your 9-year-old or almost 9-year-old,
I'll be
you're gonna have
binging.
a
Yeah.
lifetime of yeah, probably.
No kidding. No kidding. Well, David, this was really fantastic to gather your insights. Do you have one other, like, very quick tip that might be good? Maybe something about a cover letter. Are cover letters
I
relevant
don't like them.
anymore?
I don't like them.
No, okay.
I've never liked them. I've never liked them, mostly because it's an extra document to read.
Mm-hmm.
And most hiring managers, number one, don't have the time to read a full resume, much less a cover letter.
Mm-hmm.
Now, having said that, if you're working with a recruiter, and even if you're not, what we use is we call it a presentation or a introduction or a bullet pointed kind of,
Yeah.
we call it like, there's all sorts of terms for it. But if you want to send your resume into some place and you have a few things you can say that highlight where it is your background is relevant to that, or whether your skills and interests are relevant to that, that will help an employer who probably has, as I told you before, they're looking for a reason to exclude. That's
Mm-hmm.
the first thing they can do. You put a job posting out there on Craigslist, for example, just for free, and imagine just how many resumes you're going to get. And you're going to get
Right.
third-party recruiters, you're going to get recruiters, you're going to get all sorts of stuff, and there's a lot of the chaff. What you
Yeah.
want is the wheat. So if you're trying to present yourself, bulletize it and say, here's why I think I'm a relevant person for this job. Here's my resume. Short,
Nice.
sweet, to the point.
Awesome. That is an amazing tip and one that you don't ever get to hear because who really wants to write a cover letter anyway?
I've never written one my whole life. Myself, I've never used one.
Yeah, that's cool. I love it. Well, and ultimately, your resume should be answering all the questions, right? Like this is your resume should be
Yep.
customized to the point that. So think about your resume as a cover letter, but just put it in a resume format. You don't need to include everything.
Yeah, and remember that there's an expression used in sales, in recruiting specifically. It's called spilling your candy in the lobby. What that means is when you go to a client visit and you have all these great things to talk about, what you can do for them as a recruiter, if you haven't if you don't give them an opportunity to get upstairs, settle behind their desk, get their cup of coffee, start talking right away on the elevator, you've given away all the information you can, and then you got nothing left to talk about.
Mm,
So when you're talking about being a candidate, you have to understand that don't spill your candy. Keep it
I love it.
because your resume is your key to that door we talked about. You don't need
Hmm.
to kick the door in. You just need the key.
Kick the door. I love it. Oh my god, we could talk forever. So we should, and I think about that with these interviews is why I don't really like to do a lot of prep work. I like to, yeah, don't spill your candy in the lobby. I'm gonna keep that.
Don't spill your candy. Never spill your candy.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, David. This is fantastic, and thank you for all your insights. And we have a
Oh, it's more
cohort.
than my pleasure. Thank you for including me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. We have a cohort starting soon for ROI and You Digital Marketing Career Builder. So check out the website roinu.com for more information. And thanks so much.
Outstanding. Thank you so much for your time.